Hello, my name is Samuel George London, and welcome to Comics for the Apocalypse. On today's episode, I speak to comic book illustrator, writer, and exceedingly energetic person Rik Jackson about what comics he would take into the apocalypse. But before we get into it, we're only one review away from 5 ratings on iTunes. So if you enjoyed the show today, please leave a review for us there, as not only will it let me know that you liked it, but I believe it helps make other people aware of the show as well. Now, without further ado, on with the show. Hello, Rik Jackson. How's it going?
All good, thanks, Sam. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm good. It's a bit dreary today, raining fairly heavily. What about yourself?
Yeah, it is. It's rubbish out there, mate, at the moment. So,
not ideal. Because where are you?
I'm down. I'm in South London, down to Colston.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I live on the top of a hill as well, which is kind of has its benefits sometimes. But when it's crap weather,
yeah,
it lingers.
That sucks. Double-edged sword and all that.
Indeed.
But thank you so much for coming on Comics for the Apocalypse today.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
It's a real pleasure to have you on. And for anybody that doesn't know, what do you do in the world of comics?
I am a writer and an illustrator, and my main title that I put out at the moment is Heads, which is a sci-fi private detective comic.
Yeah, which I just received a couple of days ago, so thanks very much.
Fantastic, thank you. Good choice, mate. Yes, just put out the second instalment of that, and the third one's coming up soon. It's kind of like the X-Files, but based in South London.
Awesome.
It's probably the quickest and easiest way to explain it.
Great.
Yeah, I hate doing the whole elevator pitch thing and whatever, but after staring at people looking blankly at me at MCM last year when the first issue came out, as I desperately tried to entice them with all kinds of little analogies and hooks, the only thing that actually got people listening was it's the X-Files in South London, and people were like, yep, okay, I'll have some of that.
Awesome. Yeah, it's great when you find something like that, because it's sometimes difficult to get across what a story is entirely about, and kind of using stuff that people already know, that being X-Files and South London, then it perfectly encapsulates things. So
exactly, it's one of those. I always struggle with that because I desperately want to kind of describe it enticingly in a way that doesn't say it's a bit like this thing you already know. But sadly, sometimes you just, when it's the first time, you sometimes just got to get people hooked with that. Hey, you know this thing? It's like, if you like that, you'll like this.
Yeah, exactly. Ideal, mate. And where can people find that?
So it's available from my site. So you can get it from my Big Cartel store as it goes. So that's rikjackson.bigcartel.com. Which you can get to from my website as well, which is rikjackson.co.uk. And there's copies of the first issue up in Orbital in London as well, which is fantastic. Really pleased that they were able to take that on. And hopefully I'm going to be carting all issues of it around to Comic Cons throughout the year.
Excellent. And what's your next Comic Cons coming up?
So I've got Brighton Ice this weekend as it goes. So yeah, prepping for that, which would be fantastic. Hoping to get into MCM, waiting on the applications for that, and I'm looking at Nice in Bedford, because I've heard good things about that too. So people like Matt Garvey and Ken Reynolds are telling me that it's fantastic. Brilliant. So going to be up for some of that, and just there's so many good little events out there. It's just trying to sort of pick the ones that you can actually get to sometimes, isn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely.
So definitely going to be looking out for more.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Well, I unfortunately have some bad news for you, Rik, because there's actually been a zombie outbreak, and you're now in the midst of a zombie apocalypse. So my first question for you is what's your action plan for survival?
Well, after about 10 minutes of profuse swearing.
Yeah.
Mainly because Zombies. Oh God. If it was, it's more the disappointment of zombies. If there was an apocalypse I was going to end up in, I think zombies is the one that I'd kind of just go, ah, no,
Seriously.
really? Yeah, seriously. You're giving me zombies. Oh, but being like, yeah, attacked by aliens sounds like it could be quite diverse.
Yeah.
Zombies, I don't know, they're one of those. They're one of those creatures that I'm never sure if I love them or hate them. And there's so many different variants on them that, yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's a very oversaturated market when it comes to sort of stories, movies, comics, and stuff like that. But it's fantastic as well that there's so many people that just pick it up and play with it and try and give it a different spin. But overall, I think, yeah, I'd almost be in a sort of Shaun of the Dead style stupor of, for God's sake.
Yeah, definitely.
And then just crack on. But yeah, beyond frustration, my main action plan would be get into the water, get onto an island or a boat or something like that. In fact, what I think I'd probably do is, because I used to live down in Kingston upon Thames,
right?
And I don't know if you know that area, Sam.
A little bit.
But, so the Thames runs through it. It's got a lovely bit of Thames Pass down there. It's fantastic, sort of just a little town on the river, and there's loads of people who live in barges and houseboats down there, and there's a couple of bars and restaurants that are actually like moored just off the river. There's one, I can't remember the name of it now for the life of me, but it's kind of right slap bang in the middle of the river. You actually have to get a boat there and back, and it's all down this long strip that's just got pubs basically. Right. And so my plan would be hightail it down to Kingston, grab a pint,
too right,
while I'm there, and then jump in a boat straight over to one of the bars or restaurants in the middle of the river and just hole up there. It might sound a little bit short-sighted because obviously I'm kind of cut off, so my food might run out eventually. But at least I'll have, like, if I keep my boat, I can hopefully just get back out, go and get supplies and back again. But stay in the water because, as far as I'm aware, you see lots of zombies walking, stalking people. You see running zombies sometimes. I've never really seen zombies swim.
No, not so much.
So, yeah, I imagine that they just kind of drop into the river and walk around on the riverbed, just underneath you, which is fine with me.
Yeah, stay down there.
They can hang out there as much as you like, and hopefully, you never know, that might even, if I make enough of a racket, they might all sort of try and come and get a meal off me. If we end up with loads of them in the river, then that hopefully just clears the streets, so that when I do need to go out and get supplies, there's no bloody zombies around. So yeah, I'd be holed up in my little river pub. Basically.
Amazing. I love that. Holding up in a river pub. And is anybody going to join you in this river pub?
Probably. Yeah, I imagine there'll be some hangers-on. The main person I imagine would be my partner in crime. Would actually probably be my son Dylan. So right. Dylan's 12, and funnily enough, when I told him that I was going to be coming on the show, he loved the idea of it, and he was like, "Right, you and me in an apocalypse, we'd nail it." And he had so many more ideas than I did, actually, about how we could survive in all kinds of different situations. So yeah, he's an innovative little bugger. So yeah, I think I'd keep him close at hand. Between us, I think we'd fend him off and survive well.
Amazing. And sorry, his name was Dylan, you say?
That's right, yeah, Dylan.
Great. And so one night in this river pub, the conversation of comics comes up, and the first question that Dylan asks you is what's the first comic that you remember enjoying?
Oh wow, let's go back some. So the first one I really remember actually enjoying was probably one of the old Transformers, like Marvel UK reprints.
Right.
So I kind of vaguely remember sort of getting copies of like kids comics as a kid, obviously, but stuff like a bit of the Beano and things like that. I don't really have a very sort of clear memory of having much of that stuff, but I was a huge Transformers and He-Man fan when I was a kid, and I knew them from the TV shows. And one day my dad came home, because my dad was great. He was a park keeper. So during the summer he'd be working really long hours. So I wouldn't I wouldn't see him a lot when I was really young, in those like long days that he'd be doing. But sometimes, like the weekends, if he was doing a shift, I'd sort of stay up and see him when he got home, and he'd sometimes bring me home a present, and it'd usually be like a Transformer or a He-Man figure or something like that. And one day he came home with a couple of comics, and it was a Transformers comic, was the one that was on the top, and I was like, oh my god, I didn't realise that there was like a Transformers comic.
Yeah.
I was used to the show and stuff like that. So I was like, this is amazing. This means that I can get my Transformers fix all the bloody time then. So I was absolutely hooked. So I can't remember exactly which ones he brought home at first, but the one that really stuck with me is the one that I kind of went, wow, this is fantastic, was an issue with Death's Head in it. And it was quite bleak for like a kid to be reading, but it was like this. It was part way into a story because again, with some of the Marvel UK stuff, sometimes you didn't always get, like in the early 80s and whatever, you didn't always get it sequentially all the time, so you couldn't always get hold of all your copies in a row. So I think this was like the second part of like a 2 or 3 part story that I jumped in on, and it was Death's Head hunting Hot Rod,
right?
And it was nuts, absolutely nuts. I was like,
awesome.
It was just because Death's Head was.
Do you remember what year this was then?
Oh, I think it was about like 85, 86.
Okay,
like
so it was around about the movie time.
Yeah, it was around then. So like, once the movie had been and gone and whatever, obviously Hot Rod was a big deal.
Yeah.
So but Death's Head was a character I'd never really heard of. So I think this was possibly the first time I actually ever heard of Death's Head, and it was just mental. It was just like hunting down Autobots all the way through it and whatever, and it was just heads being lopped off. Of course, because it's robots, it's not gory, and actually because it's used to them sort of changing and things like that. Actually, it wasn't as shocking or horrific as you'd expect it to be. If it was like, I don't know, if it was a completely different set of characters.
If it was humans, then,
exactly.
It's an 18 rating, right?
Oh god, yeah, exactly. That's the thing. But this was like, this was almost kind of like, oh, of course their heads can come off. Why not? And like their heads like stayed sentient as well.
Right.
Of course they did. Why not?
Yeah, exactly.
But it was nuts, and the cover was absolutely amazing. It was really simple, but so effective. It was just like in the foreground you had kind of Hot Rod crawling away, while behind him, towering above him, was Death's Head with this enormous, great big axe.
Oh, gosh.
And it was just like, whoa, look at that cover. That's just nuts. And having just seen like the movie at the time as well, where you've got at the start of that movie, there's just this huge decimation of all your favourite characters.
Yeah.
Carnage, wasn't it?
It was carnage. I mean,
what a way to open it. And then to then see this comic, it's like, oh my god, there's like new leader of the Autobot. It's like, no, he's going down as well. What's going on?
They're just putting them all on the factory conveyor belt.
Yeah. Oh my god.
You've got to buy new toys now.
Yeah.
They're dead. But amazing at the same time. It kind of made it as though this universe had proper stakes to it.
God,
like there are true consequences within this universe.
That's the thing.
Amazing. And so, what do you think it was that really kind of connected you to this story? Was it the art, the story, combination of both, and kind of what do you think it meant to you as a future creator?
It kind of stuck with me and I'll say stands out as the thing that I first really enjoyed, because it was quite different from all the other types of stories that I was reading at the time. So like I say, with the kind of funny kids comics and whatever, straight away just going into Transformers, it's a bit more serious, and it was something that I was connecting with anyway as a fan. But this particular story, it was all of that whole shebang of like what this plot was of someone hunting down an Autobot. And just the way it looked with Death's Head looks insane. He's just a menacing looking character as it is. So it was just the idea that you could have quite a stark storyline, but still keep it really entertaining. Because I think that's the thing that stuck with me as a kid. It entertained me. It didn't kind of shock me. It didn't worry me. It didn't have me sort of on the edge of my seat as such. I really wanted to read the next issue to see where it all went. But it was well paced. It was well panelled. Everything was just right there at you, entertaining you the whole way through. And there was suspense to it, obviously, because you're following this hunter going after one of your favorite characters. But I don't know, I suppose as well at that age, there's a little bit at the back of my mind, even after seeing that decimation at the start of the Transformers movie, there's still like, don't worry, he's going to be all right. He will be all right. So I wasn't that worried about it. So I was like, this will be fun to read. And it was just that, just the exuberance of it all just really seemed to sort of stand out for me. And and just the fact it was utterly different from anything else. And it really, that's kind of, I suppose that's kind of what I still look for. Yeah. Something that's really entertaining. I'm all for drama. I'm all for grit. But if it isn't going to entertain me, that's not just comics. There's books. There's movies. Anything. If it's not entertaining, what's the point? And I feel like that comic particularly just nailed it.
Excellent, fantastic. And so Dylan goes on to ask, what's the funniest or comic that made you laugh out loud the most?
That's a really tricky question. Because I don't think, given what I've just said about how the funny kids comics as a kid didn't really land with me particularly, and that actually, my tastes are generally quite darker. And actually finding a funny comic, something that made me laugh out loud, it's really hard to sort of say any one particular thing. There's been plenty of comics that I've read that have had like the odd one-liner or a scene which have had me just pissing myself laughing, coffee spurting out my nose, all kinds of things. But nothing that's like really consistently from start to finish is just hilarious, in my opinion. Maybe that's just some of the stuff that I've chosen to pick up or not chosen to pick up, as the case may be. But I suppose the thing that really amused me most, that I would say is kind of the funniest comic, would be Lobo.
Great.
So it's the character mainly, rather than any one particular issue or anything, but just the character of Lobo. It's just
in general.
Yeah, it's just a legend. I just find his existence entertaining and hilarious.
Brilliant. And then, what is it that's so hilarious about him?
It's just so over the top. I mean, it's unrelenting. There's like it's quite, I suppose, quite one-dimensional in some respects. Because he just,
that can be good though.
Yeah, exactly. You don't really he's not a sort of character that you need to really sympathise with or know all your origin story or whatever. He's just fine as is. You just chuck him into anything, and he's just a nutter. And I think that just appeals to me a great deal. As I say, my taste sort of for darker humour, it's just almost a pastiche of himself immediately, isn't he? There's so much going on with him. And in comparison to similar sort of characters, I just found him just so much more fun, and therefore funnier as a result. So, I mean, there's like characters like Deadpool who are kicking about as well, sort of around the same time, and everyone loves Deadpool. I love Deadpool as well. But like when you sort of compare Deadpool to Lobo, they've got like the similarities of the kind of the sort of feigned immortality. Like Lobo's a bounty hunter, and Lobo's Merc with a mouth, and that. So they've got a lot of comparison there. But I just find Lobo just far more entertaining, far funnier. I think there's something about the fact that he's an alien as well, kind of just made it easier for me to latch onto and be entertained by, because I kind of almost have a bit of an issue about putting some superheroes with superpowers amongst people who don't sometimes. That's going to upset a lot of people. But
it's just an opinion, Rick. It's fine.
Exactly.
We can all have different opinions.
Indeed. I don't know. Just sort of some. There's just I mean, it's just sometimes I find it a little bit jarring with some characters.
Sure.
And actually with Lobo, it's just like, he's an alien, and it's like, I can get bored with that. That's absolutely fine. I kind of don't. There's not a reality that I have to adjust to. It just that's what it is. And it's just, there's so many little bits and bobs about him. I mean, straight away, as soon as I saw a cover of Lobo, I can't remember what the first one I saw. It would have probably been like one of the old Simon Beasley ones, which are just horrifically ridiculous to look at, aren't they? I mean, his art is just, I just can't even begin to describe it. It's so distinct. But like when he did a load of stuff, it's just, it looks immense. And I think just the look of him, the first time I saw him, I was like, this is Rob Zombie if he was in Kiss. That's straight away when
And
I
on
started.
steroids.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I have to read this. I have to know who the hell this guy is. And from the moment I picked it up, I was like, yep, this is great. He's just a nutter. Great big chain with a crowbar on the end of it. Rides this souped up motorbike. He's a bounty hunter in space. Yeah, go on. Why not? Love it. Absolutely love it.
So cool, man. And were there any storylines in particular that have kind of really connected you to the character?
Not particularly. If anything, it's his cameos.
Right, yeah.
That I like. That sort of really stand out for me with him. Obviously his comic runs are great. All the sort of contained series that were done were brilliant. I loved the Alan Grant and Val Samik's run in the 90s as well, which is kind of where I sort of jumped onto it. Though oddly, I don't know why, but it was really hard to get hold of in the comic stores near me at the time.
Oh, right.
So I was only sort of picking up the odd issue here and there. I've no idea why. Loads of other stuff was coming out, but yeah, Lobo seemed to be quite hard to get your hands on. So I used to grab as many of the cameo issues as I possibly could, because he'd just pop up everywhere, and he was never kind of like integral to the plot, really. It was almost like it chucked him in as a bit of a distraction, to sort of pep things up for a bit and maybe just kind of challenge the main character.
Great.
And it was brilliant because it was just, again, quite one-dimensional, often the same sort of premise of it all, that there's like a bit of a story going on. It's either part of an arc, and they've kind of just chucked him in as another obstacle, or he's basically just out on the hunt, and you're in his way, pretty much.
Amazing.
Yeah, and like seeing him pop up in like Aquaman, and I mean when he pops up in the Demon as well, it's just, yeah, I just love it. Just anything like that, I'll pick it up. If it's got Lobo on the cover, or you tell me that Lobo's snuck in, even if he's there for a page, it's going to be good.
Fun. That is fun. And changing emotions a bit, Dylan asks you, what's the saddest or most upsetting comic that you've read?
Saddest comic, I think, really was probably A Death in the Family by the Batman series.
Classic.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? It's a full-on iconic classic there, and yeah, I think that's. I mean, the whole story. There's a lot going on with it, but it's just, you know what I'm talking about. It's that bit. It's the bit where Jason Todd dies. It's just.
Of course. Yeah.
I think that's the first time I've really read a comic and had to put it down.
Oh wow!
And just kind of go, what did I just read? Did I really just read this?
Yeah. Did Robin just die? Oh
yeah, that's the thing. Did Robin just die? What? I've got it in front of me now, and I've literally flipped open, and it's just opened to like the page with the Joker just battering him with a crowbar.
Oh my god, that's brutal.
But it's horrible. I'm struggling to even talk about it because it still resonates with me, and I think it's just as well with the with what's going on during that scene, the fact that he's been captured, the Joker's beating him to death, and Batman's just like desperately fighting off everybody else, and just trying to solve his part of the story while this is all going on. And then Joker just plants a bomb, and you've got the countdown in there as well. There's a brilliant page where you kind of almost assume that Robin's dead after the beating, because you know what this story is all about, but just from the title of it, even if you didn't know,
and the cover as well, it's
exactly. But yeah, you sort of assume that he's getting a beating, but and that he's died, but he hasn't, and the bomb's there, and he's desperately trying to crawl over to deactivate this bomb. And there's a brilliant page where it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows of panels, and there's on the left is the countdown, and on the right it's all his actions to try and get him and his mum out of the warehouse and out to safety. And it's just counting down, and it's proper edge of the seat moments as you're looking at that page, because it gets down to like 12 seconds and they're nowhere near the door, and it's like, come on, really? Is this really going to happen? And it bloody does. You turn the page and there's an explosion, and he's gone. It's just,
that's it.
I'm still sort of just looking at it, kind of going, Robin's just died, man. What the hell has happened? It's It's incredible.
And how old were you when you read this? Was it at the time that it was published, or?
No, it wasn't as it goes. I picked it up, and I think that's testament to how affecting it is. I picked this up probably late 90s, I suppose. So that's quite a way after it was released. Because it was like 88, I think. Yeah,
about 10 years. Yeah.
So I kind of knew about it, and I'm a huge Batman fan. Around that time, obviously, you had you had Tim Drake in, and kind of like without having to read A Death in the Family, there's lots of reference back to Jason Todd all throughout Tim Drake's tenure as Robin, and lots of little nods to how Bruce won't trust him alone because he doesn't want to do the same thing that happened with Jason and let him strike out on his own and stuff like that. And there's all that stuff as well around him coming to terms with Dick Grayson being Nightwing as well and having regrets about that because he's putting these kids in danger, and there's a lot going on there, and you can't so you know this has happened, but still I just read it and I was like, this is it's horrible to read and so upsetting to see it actually happen and play out in front of you. And it's not graphic, but it's enough that you do sort of feel that's really happened.
And sometimes that can be even more powerful, because your imagination kind of fills in the gaps a little bit more, and then it kind of hits you a little bit harder.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's absolutely incredible. I mean, I think as well some of the stuff about it that just sort of seems even more unpleasant is particularly like Jim Apato's art is legendary throughout. The way he draws the Joker, I always thought looked a lot like Cesar Romero from the 60s show.
Yeah, oh right.
Which obviously was very camp and stuff like that as well. So when he turns and when he's really the nasty evil Joker that he's meant to be, that seems even more stark as well. And even just that page with the crowbar beating, if you're looking at the shots of the Joker, he does look maniacal, but he does look very much like that camp 60s version of him. And the fact that he's doing something so atrocious as beating Robin to death, it really jars. And I think that's one of the things as well that kind of like really upset me and saddened me as the whole story was playing out.
Amazing. And then I wonder what life would be like if, because it was done on a phone vote, wasn't it?
It was, wasn't it?
Whether or not Jason Todd was going to die, and obviously the public chose him to die. And I don't know the results off the top of my head of that, but I wonder what would happen if they chose to make him live. What impact
do you know what
on the story?
Yeah, it makes you wonder which way it would go, doesn't it? Like sort of how they'd handle the Joker and stuff as well. Because I mean, there's always you'd need to give it a really good hook there, wouldn't you? Because quite frankly, if you didn't kill Robin off in that story, it'd be a bit pants if you just kind of went, he's fine.
And it's that's just another superhero story where the superhero lives.
Yeah, exactly. It's just he's fine. He's all right. He got out. Of course he did. There was a tunnel or something.
Exactly.
And he'd be like, oh, come on, really? You'd have to give some sort of payoff, wouldn't you? You couldn't just have the rest of the story play out as it was, but with Robin there.
Yeah, exactly. And I wonder, what DC would be like today if that didn't happen.
Exactly.
Because obviously that raised the stakes, I think, for DC, because they actually killed off a main character. Yeah. Like that.
Yeah, I mean, and it was that
like properly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like we were saying about the Transformers thing, the idea that actually, hold on, I mean, these characters can die and they ain't coming back. I mean, Transformers, some of them did, fair enough. But,
I think that was a corporate decision.
Exactly, exactly. And I mean, arguably as well, Jason Todd is still an existing character, but I mean, in that part of the universe, just that's. I mean, what I was saying about the idea of superpowers amongst non-superpowered people sometimes that jars me a lot. And then that's the sort of thing that that story is so much more powerful because there's no superpower involved. Yeah. There's no way. Even if Robin was a superpowered character and actually died, I don't think I'd care as much.
Yeah,
because
Yeah,
actually there'd always be that sort of winks of the camera potentially, wouldn't there? It's like, is he going to come back? Is something else going to? Do you know what I mean? Is there going to be an alternative reality? You can always mess around with that where you've got that fantastical element to it. But no, Robin's just a bloke and he's dead, and that's it. That is
exactly.
it.
Just died in an explosion. And
It
that's
is
it.
harsh as hell, but yeah, that's what it is. And yeah, that's one of the most powerful parts about it.
Amazing. And then going along a similar line, Dylan asks you, what's the scariest or most horrifying comic that you've read?
It's something I can't remember exactly what it was. So this is gonna be a really esoteric one to explain, I suppose. But basically, going back to those kind of Marvel UK reprints that I used to read as a kid, I read a lot of those sort of up until like my early teens, before like finding comic stores to actually get like the American imports and things like that as well. But those Marvel UK ones, and they were like big A4 style reprint, like magazines almost, and they'd have the main story in it, and they'd sometimes have like another little story somewhere in there as well. But they'd often have like little one-pagers as well. I don't know whether they were just sort of things thrown in to sort of make up the page count because they were short a page or something. I have no idea. And some of them seem to have like a bit of a kind of there'd be a one-pager that have an ongoing story to it, maybe kind of a bit like your newspaper strips would, how they'd continue each day or each week. And sometimes there'd just be one-offs. And I remember one of these one-offs, and it scared the living daylights out of me. I would have been about 9, I suppose.
Okay, yeah.
And this was in like, it was like a one-pager in like Spider-Man or something. Do you know what I mean? I'm not sure if it was Spider-Man, but that's the thing that kind of stands out for me. I think it was Spider-Man or one of those kind of main Marvel characters. And it was just a really crudely drawn one-pager, very much in the sort of style of kind of like the old sort of like 50s and 60s kind of pulp horror stuff, but no color. It was just inks, line art, and it appeared to be, now this might be completely wrong because this might be my perception of it as a 9-year-old, but what I remember it being was basically kind of a deformed looking child having an inner monologue, and he was sort of like a very skinny kid, sort of like kicking about in a kitchen. It was all sort of run down and stuff, and he had kind of shaggy hair and sort of like mottled skin and like boils and stuff like that, and kind of a bit of a melty looking face.
Wow.
So it's horrible to look at for us straight away, and it was all just like his monologue as he's going through it, and you kind of look at the character, you think, oh, what the hell's that? And it's just straight away encapsulated that he's essentially a kid at home, and he gets, like, his mum, in inverted commas, comes in, gets the ump with him over something, and basically drags him off and locks him in the broom cupboard, and that's kind of it.
Brutal.
Yeah, and I was like, I may have interpreted this completely wrong. It might be something utterly different, and if I ever found it now, I'll probably read it and go, that's not that at all. But at the time, I was like, this is horrible. And like the way he was put in the cupboard was really forcefully. And as soon as he's in the cupboard, because it was just black and white line art, in the cupboard it was just really dark, just lots of black scratchy panels of him basically just sort of kind of whimpering in a cupboard. And it just seemed to be it. There didn't seem to be like, it wasn't a continuation of anything.
That was the ending.
That was it.
Oh,
and
God, that's terrible.
I was 9, and I was like, what the hell is this? And it was one of those things that, when you're in a kid and you're scared of something, but you can't help but go back and look at it again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you picked up your parents' horror movie VHS or something, there'd be something.
Yeah. You watch The Thing
awful.
when you're like 8.
You know what I mean? That's the thing. You can't help but go back and like look at the back of the cover and just stare at it and worry. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
It was that, and it was like I kind of kept this comic, even though it obviously wasn't one that, like, as an issue of whatever issue or whatever title it wasn't one that was important to me, because otherwise I think I'd remember that. So I kind of kept it because it had this horrific, scary one page in it. And I would occasionally look at it and kind of try and fathom it. And I don't think I ever really sort of reread it as such, but I just kind of stare at it, kind of thinking, why is this here? And
Yeah.
why is it so hard? And even now as an adult, even if it's not quite that, why the hell was something that terrifying in a comic that was being marketed at kids at the time?
Yeah, exactly.
But then I suppose this is also like the era where you had 6-year-olds wandering around in Freddy Krueger t-shirts and stuff as well. Do you know what I mean? The marketing in the 80s of horror movies and stuff like that was bizarre. So it probably actually chimed in with what was going on at the time. But for me, it was terrifying. And yeah.
Well, if anybody out there knows what issue this is in, or what it is,
God,
then I would love to know.
Yeah, I mean, I tried researching it, but it's one of those things that you start looking it up and like, where'd you start?
Yeah. We're gonna have to ask Tony Esmond.
Oh yeah, I reckon.
I'm sure he's probably got it
if anyone's
in his in his head somewhere. You know, the oracle that is Tony Esmond.
Oh, yeah.
Fantastic. So Dylan moves on to the next question and asks you, what's the most meaningful comic to you?
Oh, this is an easy one. It's a huge epic, but Batman Nightfall.
Great.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. No hesitation on that at all. That storyline, definitely the most meaningful comic to me. Not just because of what the story is, in the fact that it's that whole idea of Batman being taken out, his back broken. Again, it's this whole idea that you've got like
that iconic cover.
Yeah, man, yeah. There's that, and the kind of redemption story at the end of it all. If you follow it all the way through, after the main Nightfall arc into the sort of couple of years worth of storyline after it, where you had Jean Paul Valley as Batman and just like what he does to the character. This whole idea of it being just turned around into something else, but then Bruce Wayne comes back, takes back the mantle. And I mean, it's a classic sort of good versus evil story that kind of repeats itself almost, and throws a mirror up to itself a couple of times throughout the whole duration of it all. It's a fantastic epic. It was the first comic story that kind of like I just got hooked on and devoured the lot. I think I jumped into bits and bobs. I'd enjoyed sort of quite short story arcs and sort of followed the bits that jump off of those, but Nightfall was the one that I just became addicted to. My pull list was just ridiculous at the time of Nightfall, because there was all kinds of stuff going on around the edges as well, and again sort of cameo bits. I'm not a huge fan of having to buy like loads of different other comics to follow a single story, but this kind of felt justifiable, because you kind of had the Batman titles that it all followed through. So it's like, okay, I'm cool with reading all Batman titles. I kind of already was at that time. But occasionally it'd throw off into there was like a bit with the Outsiders and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? Where I was like, okay, I wouldn't normally pick this up, but I'm going to, because actually it's relevant enough. It's not just a kind of, I have to read it because I'm being marketed to. Well, it was a little bit, obviously, but at the same time, I was like, I can justify getting those extras. Yeah, because I was so wrapped up in it. I was like, I have to know every move that's made by these characters. But other than the story itself, it really opened my eyes to so much comic creation talent. And that's really why it stays with me, as particularly as a comics creator. It's one of the things that I go back to reference artists, writers, and just the whole idea of spanning a story that wide. There's so many people involved in it, and exactly. And I absolutely loved it. I mean, it's where I first discovered a couple of artists that I absolutely love and have loved ever since. Notably Kelly Jones, obviously for those covers, and Brett Blevins as well, who was the interior artist on Shadow of the Bat, which of which there's a few issues of that which touch upon Nightfall, but not until it gets into the sort of the longer run does it sort of break into its own. But those two artists they've really been standout ones for me ever since. I mean, Kelly Jones' art is just nuts. It's dark as hell and it's grim, but it's like nothing else I've ever seen. And those covers that he did for Nightfall, every single one of those covers, I mean, it's not just the iconic one of Bane breaking Batman's back that stands out for me. Yeah. I think Kelly's art was just so powerful for me that I can kind of conjure almost all of the kind of main Nightfall run covers to mind, without having to look them up. And just some of them are just yeah, just blew me away. I mean, there's one. I'm trying to find out which issue number it is now because I've got them in front of me. But the one particularly with just half of Batman's head poking above the water as he's kind of drowning, and there's rats climbing over his head, and it's like, oh man, that's just,
oh my god,
it's just such a scary image, and stuff like the one with Amygdala about to beat him to death and stuff like that, and it's just the use of darkness that Kelly Jones puts into his art is masterful. I've got to say though, as much as I love him, his cover art is probably my favorite output of his. I mean, I'm not as much of a fan of his interiors sometimes. Right. Again, he did a Batman run shortly after Nightfall finished, and I found that a bit hit or miss. But then he also did a load of stuff on Venom as well, which was just actually from an interior point of view, a lot of that was fantastic. But I think it's because he had something like Venom to play with. That's a sort of character that he could just go completely crazy with. But yeah, so I mean, I fell in love with Kelly Jones through Nightfall. And yeah, Brett Blevins is it's an artist that I didn't like at first. I really sort of found his art quite jarring and quite unpleasant to look at.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a fluidity to his lines that I find quite unsettling, and a crudeness and dirtiness to the way people's faces look. It doesn't matter what expression they're doing; they always look a bit sort of seedy and sinister. Wow. I mean, even Batman. Batman, whether he's as Batman or as Bruce Wayne, when Brett Blevins draws him, he's just sort of like, I kind of don't like you. I just don't. I mean,
just got one of those faces that you want to hit.
Yeah, and I mean, when his art hits in this, it's at the point where Jean-Paul Valley is Batman, so that kind of works as well, because you kind of don't really want to like Jean-Paul Valley as Batman because he's rogue as hell. But he does I think it's 2 or 3 issues, 3 issues, yeah, of Shadow of the Bat, where it's a Scarecrow story, and the way he draws Scarecrow is nightmare-inducing, quite frankly.
Yeah, very unsettling.
Yeah, and but I actually found that again, it was that like, I'm going to keep looking at it because I'm not sure if I like this or not, and I'm not sure if it upsets me or not. And the more and more I looked at it, the more I realised, you know what, I really love how he's taken these sort of characters and used his art style to make them seem so much more sinister and unpleasant. And actually, I really loved his art after that, when I kind of came to that revelation that, yeah, it's the unpleasantness, it's the crudeness that I love about it. And yeah, and then I became utterly addicted to his stuff too.
Amazing. You know what, I'd love to see the cork boards that they had of interconnecting all of the issues within that. It must have been like a whole, hall of of storyline connecting.
It's brilliantly done. I mean, just I actually found that the idea of breaking everyone out of Arkham Asylum to be more dramatic than breaking Batman's back, in my opinion. Just because it's just all the work that he's done in his entire career as Batman, and Bane just like, I'm going to blow the doors off. It's all undone in one go. And just the sense of responsibility that Batman feels of like, right, I've got to clean up this mess. And it's like, well, actually, if you sit back and look at it, mate, you don't.
Yeah.
There's an entire police department out there in Gotham City. Yeah, you put them all away, but that doesn't mean you've got to keep them there, does it? You know what I mean? So, and you're just one bloke, and yeah, you've taken them all out one by one, but that was over a large period of time, mate. Don't feel too bad. So, yeah, but he just takes it all on though. And but I mean, I suppose you would though, wouldn't you, if you'd have done something like that, something significant, cleaning up the streets. Yeah, exactly. It's the type of bloke he is. But I think anyone who's got pride in their work, if you saw it all undone, you'd be like, nope, no, we're gonna sort that. And but it's his undoing. It's completely his undoing. And I mean, the character of Bane is I don't think he's given credit for the intelligence all the time, because again, he's so iconic looking and such a physical brute, that yeah, I mean that in itself is part of the beauty of creating a character like that and giving him that kind of intelligent strategic mind. But because it is a slow trickle before you realise, hold on a minute, he's really pulled the strings here, isn't he? He's not just some nutter who's just kicked the doors off Arkham and tried to take control of things. He has built up to this, and there's something quite sadistic about the fact that obviously he's got his drugs that pump him up. He's clearly formidable. He's a match for Batman and then some, as it is. But instead of just kind of going, I'm just going to take him out, like, no, I'm going to wear this guy down for weeks. I'm just going to completely destroy him mentally, physically, and then I'm going to break his back. And it's just
the cherry on the top.
Harsh. That's an evil person. That is really, really evil.
Seriously malicious. So the next question that Dylan asked you is, what's the most underrated comic that you've read?
This was quite a tough question as well, as it goes, because I suppose it's one of those things of I could have pulled out something that no one's ever heard of, and it's underrated because no one's ever heard of it, but then it's always going to be, I suppose. So I've gone for something that's a bit more well known, but it's well known for the wrong reasons, in my opinion, and in conversations that I've had with people. And it's The Mask.
Right.
Because in my experience, whenever I've mentioned The Mask to people, they go, "Oh yeah, Jim Carrey movie," and it's
all it's remembered for.
It's all it's remembered
by most people.
Which is fair enough, because I mean it was arguably an indie book originally. I mean, published by Dark Horse. It was very kind of underground, very kind of MTV, I suppose, in some respects. And it got snapped up to be this big budget movie. Jim Carrey, flavour of the month at the time. Cameron Diaz, sort of a big springboard for her. It was huge, and it was loads of fun. But it's poles apart from what the actual story, the actual character of The Mask is. Yeah. I mean,
they just made it about Jim Carrey.
They did.
They played into how he acts.
Exactly. I mean, basically. And in some respects, fantastic. He's a great choice. It was good fun. But they just, they just turned it into a Jim Carrey comedy. It's just, Ace Ventura painted green, basically.
Essentially.
Fair play.
Yeah, exactly.
It was entertaining. Made a load of money. It's been successful, but it didn't really open anyone up, I think, to what The Mask really was. Yeah. And it's so much crazier and ultra violent than the movie will ever let you believe. And other than the fact that I think it's underrated because people kind of dismiss it as, it's just that Jim Carrey movie, and then they kind of flick through it and kind of go, I might look at this, I might not. I think the thing that really stands out for me about what The Mask is its ability to really exploit what comics can do in respect of just absurdity. I mean, when you look at like making a movie, for example, if you want to do all kinds of crazy stuff, you want to have like big set pieces, it costs money. You want to have big explosions and CGI and make it look good, make it fit the style, make it not look jarring, make it all cohesive. It costs money. You want big actors in there, it all costs money. So anything like that, it's constrained by your budgets, whereas actually something like comics really isn't. As long as you've got an artist who's willing to do it for the fee that you can pay, or if you're small press, do it your bloody self. The world's your oyster. You can really create absolutely anything you like. I mean, it's the same as writing a novel, I suppose, but to be able to put the images down on paper and just kind of go, that is exactly what I want it to be, and I'm going to show you it. And I'm going to ram it down your throat that this is exactly what I had in mind, and it's over the top. It's stuff you'd never be able to do in real life. It's stuff that if you made a movie of this, it would be nigh on impossible to do it. And I just feel like The Mask really does a lot of that very well. Just the fact that the character itself, it's kind of like crossing sort of Looney Tunes with the Twilight Zone and Beavis and Butthead. all in one go.
Amazing. That is a great comparison.
There's just so much that goes on in it, and every time someone puts the mask on, it just transforms them into whatever they obviously kind of deeply seated want to be. But then it just goes out the window as well, doesn't it? It's just there's so many things that happen in it. I mean, my favorite is the Mask Strikes Back, mainly because it just jumps right in, because it's kind of the second installment, and there's no hanging about. It's just a very, very brief recap of this thing happened with this mask. Oh my god, it's awful, and it's literally like a month later or something, and it all just kicks off with this bunch of kids who've got the mask, and they kind of trade it round, and so therefore you've got all these different incarnations of the mask that come out of it all, but it just does ridiculous things. I mean, there's a bit where like he kind of swallows his mate's head.
Amazing.
And he's wandering around with his mate hanging out of his mouth, just with his head in his mouth, and he's just like, what? Who thinks of this stuff? And like every time he gets battered by something or someone, or like blown up or whatever, just the way it's done is just outrageous. Like every time like he meets up with Walter and they're having fights, he just gets his head caved in all the time, and it's just like there's teeth flying everywhere, his eyeballs are hanging out and stuff, and then he's like, yeah, okay, great, well, I'm going to shake that off, and now I'm suddenly something else. And there's a fantastic scene in The Mask Strikes Back where he's auditioning at like a cabaret club or something, and he ends up like as a solo artist doing a gig, and he starts off as this kind of like hellish thrash metaler, and then just switches around and turns into a member of the Rat Pack. And Amazing. It just sort of jumps between it all, and then like he's got the guitar sort of that he's been playing as the thrash metaler that he's sort of swung around behind him, and that's always hanging over his shoulder, and you don't really notice it's there until he gets into a battle, in which case he turns around and picks it up again, and it's a bloody great big axe. And it's just these constant bits where it just sort of swaps around all the time, and he's after he's like been swinging this axe, Walter chucks an amp over his head, and it literally crashes all the way over him, just like Daffy Duck would have a TV fall over his head. But the two panels that you've got juxtapose it all completely, because you've got him standing there as like Frank Sinatra, basically, with this axe guitar smashed to bits in his hand, and an amp like balanced above his head. It crashes over him, and he's then poking out the top of the amp. Just like I say, very Looney Tunes. But at this point now, he's turned back into the thrash metaler. So he's all clad in sort of like straps and leather and stuff, and there's this wild hair. And it's just the act of just chucking an amp over him. It's just turning him into something else. And he's like, right, not having this. And then he just caves the place in with a load of amps that aren't there. He's just kind of gone, no, not having it, and just pulled things out of nowhere. And it's, I mean, I can see why some people would kind of go, this is just a bit absurd, quite frankly. It's just far too much going on. It's quite unrelenting throughout it all. But it's just the idea that you can kind of go, do you know what? Give me an idea. Yeah, we'll do that. Give me another idea. Yeah, go on, we'll do that. I imagine that they were almost like the creative team were probably just sitting around just throwing stupid ideas at each other. What about this? Yeah, of course we can cover that. How would you draw this? I'll draw it this way. Do you know what I mean? And then, yeah, there's just so much with it that has just. I mean, I'm sitting there just looking through some of it, and it's absolutely amazing. The bit where as well in the Mask Strikes Back where he kind of becomes a superhero at the end in a zoo, and falls kind of like a Justice League around him of the animals there, and there's a brilliant splash page of a gorilla, a lion, a bear, and a giraffe. Loosely dressed as various well-known superheroes. The funniest bit, in my opinion, is the fact that you've got a gorilla who's essentially meant to be Wonder Woman, and it's just this lion with Cyclops' visor on. It's like,
wow,
ridiculous. Yeah, and it's fantastic, and I mean the art style is quite pulpy. But it kind of fits. It's just it's quite scratchy and sketchy, and like I say, very kind of that MTV generation kind of look to it all and whatever. I mean, it's obviously was kicking about at a time when you had stuff like The Tick, and like Beavis and Butthead, and TV shows like Duckman. So it really fits the era very nicely. But yeah, as a comic, I don't think it's given enough credit for just throwing his hand in and kind of going, do you know what, this is it. This is what we're going to do with this, and we're going to do it to the nth degree. And if you don't like it, then look at something else.
Amazing, just being what it's meant to be.
Exactly.
Not playing into people's hands and pandering to people. Fantastic. So we come on to the hardest question that Dylan has to ask you, and he asks, what's the best comic of all time?
That's a stumper, isn't it?
It's quite a question.
It is quite a question. Yeah, I mean, how do you just sort of boil it down to just one? Funnily enough, there's a friend of mine in the States who runs a podcast called Dead as Hell. It's a horror podcast, but he does a lot of music stuff on there too. And he actually, we've been friends for a while, and he emailed me about a year ago, just one question: what's the greatest song ever written? And I was like, what?
I mean, how can you?
You can't ask me that.
Yeah, it's difficult.
Exactly. I've deigned to answer still as well.
Still thinking.
Exactly. I've given him various, like, these are my favourite lyrics.
Yeah.
This is my favourite arrangement. It's like, what's the best song ever? I'm like, oh my God. And it's the same thing with a comic. How do you just kind of go, that one, that's it. That encapsulates the lot. I've picked what I think, having deliberated over that for quite a while, that I think is the greatest comic ever written. And I imagine if you ask me again in a month, I'll have kind of gone, oh no, actually this and stuff. But right now, sitting in front of me, the greatest comic ever written, ever created, is Batman: The Killing Joke.
Brilliant.
It's just
comic.
And it's another classic, isn't it? It's just
absolutely.
I mean,
it's a game changer as well.
It is. It really is. I mean, there was a little part of me that was sort of toying with the idea of throwing Watchmen on the table. Because it's an utter masterpiece as well. But no, I mean, sticking with Alan Moore, keep him on side, you know.
Yeah.
The Killing Joke is it's a monumental piece of comics creation. It's beautifully written, it's beautifully drawn, it's so well paced, and yet so small as well, that you kind of look at it and kind of go, how can this, compared to the opuses that Alan Moore's done in the past, how's this going to be the game changer? But it's because of its simplicity, and there's kind of not much meat on its bones really, but that's why it sucks you in.
Yeah.
So, it just takes you through quite a simple concept really, which is one bad day can change your life.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. It certainly does, doesn't it?
Yeah, and the fact that that concept is pulled out by the Joker is in itself quite monumentous. A character who has his interesting take on finesse and elegance, but not necessarily renowned for being that kind of a thinker, really. I don't think, and in that respect, and to actually have him laying down that gauntlet and kind of holding a mirror up to Batman and basically saying, without knowing what's happened to Bruce Wayne as a kid, but basically kind of going, something must have happened for you that turned you into this, and it must have been one moment that made you switch. And seeing the Joker's story played out in flashbacks throughout it, so you can see what his bad day was, and how it made him switch. It's you sympathise with him so much. He's basically just an out of work comedian who's just really down in his luck. He's got a pregnant wife who's going to give birth any second. He's desperate, absolutely starkly desperate to try and get his wife and his kid out of Dodge. And he'll do anything for him, and it's love that's driving him to do it, because he's all the way through when he gets caught up with this mob who are doing a heist, and the fact that they give him the red mask and all that. He's really not happy about any of it, and especially when it gets into the heist and it all goes wrong. He's so regretful of getting himself involved in any of it at all. But he's only done it for love. He's only done it for his family and just to look after his own. He's been driven to that point where he's just I can't get a job, I can't get a loan, I can't look after my family. I have to do something, and he gets wrapped up with the wrong crowd, and ends up essentially falling into some chemical waste, becoming disfigured, and just that's the final straw. As soon as he sees that that's happened to him, after that his wife and his kid have basically been killed as well. They're killed in a car crash, and it's horrible. It all happens like within 24 hours, and it would send you mental, wouldn't it? It would definitely feel like any one of those things would be enough to send you over the edge. And he has a lot to deal with, and to try and sort of draw that out and kind of tell Batman, I know that something like this happened to you, and to try and know him in that way, be so offensive for Batman as well, for someone who's kept that secret, is that to have essentially his arch enemy just turn around and go, I know you intrinsically. I don't know the details, but I'm right, aren't I? And
they really connect over this, don't they?
They do, yeah. But the fact that the subtle thing being is that he tries to prove the point by trying to give Jim Gordon his worst day, to turn Jim Gordon to one of them, essentially. And it doesn't work. And it's almost over too quickly in that respect, as to the fact that it hasn't sent Jim Gordon over the edge, because basically when Batman finally sort of rescues him, it rescues him and he's off after the Joker straight away. So it's very quick, and just a couple of panels and a couple of phrases that kind of point it out, that actually it's not worked. And it's just the fact that he's the Joker's taken down Barbara Gordon, shot her, paralyzed her, exploited her, kidnapped Jim Gordon, forced him to be privy to all this, to try and send him mad. And as a father, you can see that he's just utterly hurting and doesn't know what to do about this. And when Batman actually intervenes, you're half expecting Jim Gordon to just turn a blind eye and just let Batman do whatever he needs to do. And the fact that it's been alluded to about the fact that Batman and the Joker are going to kill each other one way or another at some point in their relationship, you do kind of think, this is it. Gordon's just going to kind of go, do it, just do it. And he doesn't. He screams at him, you've got to bring him in by the book. And that in itself is like, oh my God, no matter what's happened to this man, he's shown us the best of us, by just keeping his morals upright and kind of saying, do you know what, in the face of all this, I'm not stooping to your level. I'm not going to change my ways. I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to do it by the book. And that's so powerful. Absolutely amazing.
Incredible. And as a creator, what do you think that story's effect has had on you?
It's certainly stayed with me ever since I first read it. It's one of the few that I regularly go back and reread. I say regularly, sort of periodically, I suppose. But I think it's the moral thread throughout it, which is something I'm particularly picking up, like as a creator when I'm writing heads. That there's what I'm trying to do with that story is, even though it's presented as kind of like this sci-fi mystery, it's really a story about morals and loyalty. And as that develops, it's going to become clearer that it's not a story about three crazy girls with mad huge animal heads pulling off heists. It's actually about three friends, and their different moral standpoints and their different loyalties to each other and other people, and the way that twists around. And I think The Killing Joke was the first time I read any story, really, not just a comic, but any story that kind of showed me that, as to how you can have this juxtaposition of morality, and that actually people have their own interpretation of morality, and will justify to themselves what their actions are and why they carry them out, and can see no wrong in that. And that's not just from a literary point of view, but from a life point of view. That's quite sobering.
Yeah, very, very powerful. And it's just amazing that that can be encapsulated in a comic that can be read again and again and again, and it just gets you to question your own decisions, basically.
It very much does. Yeah, it does.
Incredible.
I wouldn't like to comment on how I think I'd act if I was Jim Gordon.
Yes,
I feel the same thing. I read this. I've read this several times over the years. I read this before I was a parent, obviously, and found it a very strong storyline, and a powerful thread there of what it takes on. But yeah, as a parent reading it, I have a different view.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's just. Yeah, it really does stand out. And I mean, one of the other things about it as well is that whole thing with Barbara Gordon. We were saying earlier on with the some of the stuff about death in the family, where what you don't see is worse sometimes. And there's you see her get shot, you know that's happened, and that's horrible to see, and you see it happen in front of Gordon. But then what you don't see is what the Joker does next. And I think that's one of the things as well that I've interpreted differently each time I've read it. Because basically he goes to they kidnap Gordon, Barbara Gordon's laying there on the floor, and the Joker steps up and starts undressing her. And that's it. It cuts. And you don't see any more of that. But you find out from her when she wakes up in hospital. It's not from her, from Bullock, who's been investigating it all, that they found a camera, a shutter cover, and it doesn't match anything in the house. So that the Joker's been taking photos, and that he's undressed her, and that in itself is very sinister. And later on, you don't actually see much. You see glimpses of photos, but nothing explicit. But that it's her undressed. And I remember when I first read it as well, kind of thinking, okay, that's kind of all that happened. Right. I just took that at face value, that okay, so that was a horrible thing to do, but that's done, and end of the story. But then as I've got older, and again as I've become a parent, there's so much that's in there that isn't said, and that you don't know if anything else happened. You don't know if all he did was just undress and take pictures just to upset Gordon, or if something else happened, because it was just the two of them in the house by that point. Everyone else had gone, and you never know. It's never explained. It's never drawn out, and it plays at you as to did anything else happen. And like I say, becoming a parent, that becomes even more upsetting and startling to read. And the fact that then Gordon's response, regardless of whether anything else happened or it was just as it was on the page, the fact that Gordon's response was not going to do anything differently. I must do this my way. I must stay the man I am, is astounding.
Yeah, astounding. That's it's a great word for it. So we come on to our last question in regards to comics. So if you could only take one comic into this zombie apocalypse from your list, which would it be?
It'd have to be some Lobo.
Awesome.
I love it. After a massive oration about how incredible the Killing Joke is, I was like, we'll just have some Lobo. Why not? To be perfectly honest, though, as I said, I couldn't get hold of many copies when I was younger, so I've only actually got a handful anyway. So I suppose, if I had to grab them, I'd grab them. If I managed to be by a comic store at the time, I'd run in and see if they had any back issues too. But Lobo, I think, would just keep me amused. And also is innovatively violent, and sense of humour and clever ways of taking people out are probably two things I'd need to be armed with when I go up against the bloody zombies. So
right. And speaking of which, going up against the zombies, what weapon, tool, or useful item would you like to take into the apocalypse?
I thought about this for a while, and considering I told Dylan about the idea of this apocalypse we'd be going into, I posed the question to him, And I thought, let's see. You never know. He might make a bit more of a snap decision. There was me looking around the house, thinking, what would I take? What would I grab? He didn't think about what was in the house. He just went, "We'll take a sword."
Amazing.
And I was like, "Yeah, do you know what? Why not? We'll find a sword, because actually, that's a fantastic thing to take along with you. You can kill things, you can hunt things, you can beat your way into things and hack your way into things and out of things. So it's a good defensive and offensive piece of kit. It's also overtly threatening, just to sword out.
Just
because
intimidating, isn't it?
Yeah, well, the thing with that is, if we assume that there's just zombies and it's basically just me and Dylan and the rest of the world are zombies, then that's not really that interesting or useful. But if there's a chance that other people aren't zombies as well, you could very easily take people out that you shouldn't be taking out. I mean, if you've ever seen Night of the Living Dead, the way that ends, that's brilliant. That's exactly the whole point. There's police there with guns, and they're like, right, hold on, we'll take him out. Oh no, it's a bloke. Shit.
Oh dear.
That's not a zombie. Oh no. So yeah, if you had a gun on you or something, then you'd probably pull that out. You'd act too quickly with that. You can be shooting zombies in inverted commas from quite a distance and not know who you're getting. Whereas actually, if you've got a sword, I imagine, Sam, if you were trying to swim across the Thames to try and join me in my fortress pub, and I brandished a sword at you, you'd probably flinch and scream at me.
Yeah, I think twice.
So exactly, yeah. But that's great, because then I'd realise he's not a zombie. Let's have Sam on board. Brilliant. And I'd help you up. So actually,
I appreciate that, mate.
That's all good. Let's take it. It's actually a good way of making sure that I don't end up murdering the rest of the human race by mistake, but also ensuring that I'm building allies around me. So actually, I think a sword would be a fantastic thing to take along.
Very, very smart. Well, Rik Jackson, thank you so much for being on Comics for the Apocalypse. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, mate.
Oh, it's awesome. And just one more time for the listeners, where can they find you?
Okay, you can go to my website, which is rikjackson.co.uk, or you can follow me on Twitter, and on Twitter I am GoJacksonGo.
Awesome. And then projects coming up this year. What else you got coming up in the pipeline?
More heads. So first one came out last year. Second one came out just end of winter around this year, and the next one I'm hoping late summer, early autumn, for the third installment of what is a 5-issue miniseries, which is the first arc of Heads. So that'll be out then. So there'll probably be a Kickstarter coming up sort of end of summer, and hopefully if I'm in for MCM London in October as well, I'll be brandishing it around then too.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, thanks again, Rik, and I hope to catch you at a con soon.
Fantastic. Thank you, mate. Been a pleasure.
Cheers. Bye. Thanks again to Rik for being on Comics for the Apocalypse. I had an absolute blast. If you enjoyed the show today, please leave a review for us on iTunes or whichever podcast service you use, as not only will it let me know that you liked it, but I believe that it helps make other people aware of the show as well. If you'd like to check out Rik's work or follow him on social media, those links are in the show notes, along with all of our own links to the various areas of the internet. And finally, as long as the apocalypse doesn't come to pass in the next week, I'll see you next Monday. Bye for now.